All right, thank you so much for joining us. If you could introduce yourself, what you're running for, and when your election is.
Yeah, so my name is Nate Blouin. I am a state senator here in Utah and have lived in Utah since 2009. Moved out here to be near our public lands, and it's such an incredible state for recreation. Spent years as a ski bum actually, and then struggled through having to pay the bills and got my act together. Went back to community college, all those sorts of fun things. And then got into politics. I've worked in the clean energy space and have had a good time working on environmental issues. And so, yeah, I'm running for the new congressional district that we got handed down through a judicial decision here in Utah. We have a very far to the left sort of district. Harris won it by 24 points. And that election will be in June 23rd will be the primary. That's really going to be the deciding factor here. And then the general will be what, November first Tuesday in November next year.
So, I mean, you mentioned that you've got new maps, and I know that your governor and your state legislature is continuing to fight those, but for now they are what they are. So, other than that, why now? Like, where is this run coming from? Because you've got an establishment candidate that you're running against in the primary as well. So, what motivated you to do this now?
Yeah, I mean, I was not planning to run for this seat before we got the map decision. I mean, we expected more of like a purple seat, which we've had here in Utah before. We've had, the same candidate running in this race represented a district that is about 35 points to the right of the current district, and I think good fit there, but not a good fit in a progressive seat that Bernie won by a long shot, actually endorsed by Bernie Sanders. That was super exciting. And there's urgency. People don't have this sense of people that have been doing politics for 50 and 20 plus years don't have this sense of urgency. They keep trying to do the same things, work behind the scenes to, do things collaboratively, but they're collaborating with people who have no interest in actually like promoting the long-term viability of our country. They are working for the billionaires, working for Trump and that whole class of people that are really in it for themselves, and people are struggling and they need help. So that's why I'm running, is to promote programs that actually help the working class, to push back on the excess of power that the White House has taken. We're going to win a majority as Democrats here in 2026, and we'll have the opportunity to do oversight and to rein in the executive branch, because they've just gone unchecked, and that's been the fault of both Republicans and Democrats. And so we need to be willing to tackle that right now.
Utah has talked about generally, I'm from Virginia, so I'm far away from the conversations about your state, but talked about generally as like a conservative stronghold. So obviously there's a bit of a popular misconception about the state if someone like you could like actually win a congressional district. So what are people misunderstanding about Utah as a whole?
Yeah, so I mean, Utah as a whole is a fairly red state. There's it's interesting. There's a little bit of an anti-Trump strain. I mean, we still voted for Trump by a large margin, but we've got a religious community here, the Latter-day Saints, that are pretty conservative in a lot of different ways, and that means like they don't like the coarse language, they don't like the harsh rhetoric that Trump is using. So there's still a big MAGA contingent for sure, but it may not be as strong as people kind of see from the outside. Utah was actually like the only state, or one of the only couple of states, that moved slightly to the left last year. There was a nice map, I think the New York Times or someone put out, that showed like these arrows, blue
Yeah.
and red arrows, and Utah was the only one of the only ones that moved. I mean, it was minimal, it wasn't much, but it was like we didn't move right, we moved slightly left. So there's kind of a counterculture here in Salt Lake County area in particular, where this district is. We've got universities, we've got young people, we've got a diverse community across the district. The west side is, it's kind of historically like split apart by redlining and that sort, and the freeway. And so you've got a lot of Hispanic population out there, and we've got to work for all those people. And that's not something people realize about Utah. Yeah, we've got this diversity, we've got this political diversity, this counterculture, I think, to the predominant religion in this area.
Yeah.
That we're really a blue dot. This is a district that Bernie won with like 80% in our caucuses a few years ago, and then progressive candidates won like 60+%, and we switched over to primaries from caucuses to primaries, and so progressive candidates generally win in the Salt Lake City and surrounding areas by heavy margins. So you get outside of that, things change a little bit, but this area in particular is very progressive.
Feel like that's kind of not common necessarily, but like a trend across a lot of red states is that there are these blue dots that tend to get, cracked by gerrymandering. But you mentioned that you've been endorsed by Bernie Sanders, which is very exciting. You're not afraid of the progressive title. And that runs, I think, a bit counter to the wisdom that candidates in red states have to moderate. You have to moderate in order to win. And that's something that's like surrounding like Afton Bain, for example, in Tennessee. She swung that district 13 points to the left, and people are still like, well, if she had just moderated, which I think is ridiculous. We had a more moderate candidate last year, and that was,
Yeah.
and that was worse. So
Those,
can you speak to that a little bit?
yeah, I mean, those same people are pushing the establishment candidate in this race. It's really funny. I think what we learned, or what I learned, and what I thought other people learned, but again, the same people are making the same mistakes, just in this recent election a month ago, was that you run candidates who fit the district. You run Abigail Spanberger, where you're at in Virginia, good fit for the state. You run Zohran Mamdani in New York City, where you've got a real left-leaning contingent, where DSA has built up a big platform there. And you run, folks that are progressive. I represent a district that's like 50 points to the left here that's gerrymandered like crazy in
Yeah.
Salt Lake City. And so, run candidates like me in districts that can actually elect us and that we align with the values of the voters. I think that to me is the message.
So tell us about like your day one priorities. You get sworn in, assuming that they swear people in on time, which they will, of course. What are you doing?
Yeah, so one thing I've committed to, again, with our diverse population here in Utah, and actually Utah we're a red state, but traditionally we've been very friendly to refugees and immigrants because of the influence of the church. That's changed in recent years, which is really sad. We were kind of a haven. We had good resettlement programs. People were willing to help out, and we've seen our neighbors demonized in far too many instances. We had someone pulled out of the Salt Lake City airport in a very visible incident a few weeks ago. Really sad stuff. And so day one, I'll be out. We have an ICE facility here. As a member of Congress, you have some authority to go in and investigate those facilities. I want to go do that. I think it's going to be a lot of oversight type stuff because we're not going to have the Senate or the White House on day one, but we are going to have, we're going to have a majority in the House, which gives us the ability to, again, rein in those White House powers, the uses of force in the Caribbean, the oversteps of our foreign policy in Israel. I think we need to address those issues. There's a whole range of policy issues. One of my personal passions is like geothermal energy, which actually is pretty bipartisan. Utah could be the world leader in geothermal energy, which means we could produce more clean energy, more affordable energy, and bring costs down for our folks here in Utah because we're seeing rising electricity costs, which contributes to the whole range of affordability issues when it comes to, again, another issue, tariffs that we need to work on and bring in Trump's authority to just unilaterally levy tariffs that are raising costs across the board for constituents. So I think it's a lot of things like that. Finding funding for the Great Salt Lake, which is an environmental disaster in the making here in Utah. Yeah, there's some serious public health problems that are arising from a low Great Salt Lake. So there's a whole range of things I think that when it comes to kind of funding that maybe aren't legislative like bills, but other areas where we can work on without having the majority across the board. And again, here in Utah, we have a super majority in the legislature, so that's what I'm coming from. So even just having a majority in the chamber I serve in would be a welcome change that I think would make things much more productive.
So you touched on affordability a bit, and I know that Utah is every state really is dealing with housing costs spiking. It's terrible here, especially in the northern part of the state, closer to DC. But is there anything you have in mind about how Congress could actually affect that? Because I feel like a lot of people focus on like local legislation when it comes to housing costs, but it's a nationwide problem. So do you have any ideas for housing affordability?
Get rid of the tariffs.
Yeah.
That's raising. again, tariffs can be productive if you target them in the right ways, but these big tariffs across, wide ranges of industries are raising costs for construction materials that can help us build more affordable housing. I'm all in favor of the supply side of building more housing. I would say I'm a YIMBY when it comes to housing in particular. There's some other stuff like you don't want a natural gas plant in your backyard, right? Like there are reasons to have good zoning and permitting and all that stuff. When it comes to housing, it should be pretty easy to build. And again, a lot of that's local. I think we could incentivize with pretty big grants and additional loans through HUD and that sort of thing to say to local communities, hey, if you take on zoning reform at the local level to bring in some more housing for ownership in particular. I think we need to address that issue and make sure people can buy in and create wealth that can last for generations. That's a big deal. And so I think there's strings we could put out, strings to incentivize local communities to do some of those things. I think landlord tenant protections, Utah is horrible. We're probably one of the worst states for tenants in the entire country. So I think we can address some of those issues to keep people in their housing so they're not getting evicted. That would help with homelessness. That's like one of the easiest ways to prevent homelessness is just to keep people in their existing unit. So yeah, I think those are a couple things we could do. I'd like to see. I'd like to see the state here in Utah act. That's one. That's more the most direct nexus in my current position is like the state could take on the ability, the power to basically tell local communities. And this actually, I'm going to go to a city legislative preview right after this, and they're not going to be happy that I'm saying that we should take some of their power to zone in their community. And actually, this city in particular is doing well, Mill Creek, where I live. But some of our cities are just not doing well, pushing out any sort of density, any sort of. We had like 30 townhomes in a relatively not that dense design rejected by a city here in Salt Lake County recently. And it's just like ridiculous to see them pushing out really common sense projects that are going to bring more affordable housing into the community. So I think there's a whole range of things, but the federal government, has the money, I think is the big thing to put out loans and incentives for housing that we are not seeing at this point.
It's so funny. Like, I think blue states have such a bad reputation for not allowing construction of new housing, which is earned, to be fair. But red states are so bad about it as well. Except with the exception maybe of Texas, there are so many red states that are like, no, you can't build that here, actually.
I mean, to their credit, I think California just passed a big zoning bill. I think it was SB 79. I don't know the details of it, but it sounded like a really positive step for California. They have this. California is a dirty word in Utah. It's ridiculous. Like our Republicans love to demonize, and they're like, don't bring your California policies to Utah when you move here. It's really sad that that's become the narrative. But I always have to remind people that like California is the fourth largest economy in the world.
Right.
And, running on clean energy, half the time. I mean, there are amazing things that California is doing. And now I'm going to get, chastised by my friends here in Utah for saying that, but that's all right.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, you don't have to adopt every policy of California. You can at least not be hostile to people who are moving to your state.
Exactly.
But anyway, okay, so you touched on this a little bit. I want to talk about working across the aisle because this is something I think that especially progressives versus establishment candidates think about very differently. Like you mentioned, establishment candidates still feel like we're in this sort of collegiate era of secret handshakes, wink, wink, nod, nod. I feel like that era's a little bit over. So how do you get your priorities enacted somewhere like the House of Representatives if you're not going to be someone who's playing that game, that kind of old school politics game?
It's such a balance. I think one thing I've kind of said before is like, bipartisanship is not a means to an end, right? Like, I don't really care if something's bipartisan or not. Like, if it's good policy, we should do it and try to bring people along. And I think it's good to work across. It's good to try and bring people on board with those priorities because it creates more stability. Like, if you can pass a policy that has bipartisan support, it's like less likely to get overturned in a subsequent, chamber where the majority is flipped. So I think it's good to have those conversations to try to do it, but I don't think it is the end all be all. Like, I don't think we should be compromising ahead of time to try and bring over the votes. I think it's more of like we should put forward the policy that people need, and if we can pass it without bipartisan votes, then fine, let's do it. If we can get folks on board with that, or if there are some minor concessions to make that make it a little bit more palatable, that's fine to me. But I think for too long we've been willing to compromise on some of these big issues, and like the healthcare fight a month or two ago, where you saw a number of Democrats step back from that fight, and people are going to potentially see thousands of dollars in increased healthcare costs or health insurance costs because of that decision. And I think that speaks to the difference in kind of urgency and approach there, where the folks who are really looking for these bipartisan wins over actual good policy are hurting our ability to get our constituents what they need. I think one thing is, I'm running for the House, but in the Senate, you've got the filibuster, and the filibuster really prevents policy from happening. I mean, I think majorities should have the opportunity to pass the things that they think their voters want. I think if the Republicans were able to do that, people would pretty quickly see through it and be like, wow, this is counterproductive. It's hurting our ability to pay for our rent, to put our kids into good schools, and they would, see what we are proposing, Medicare for all, higher minimum wages, pretty common sense stuff, and come on board. And I think, and then we would have the ability ourselves with a 51 vote threshold in the Senate to actually do the stuff that people are asking for. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. And all this contributes to people, citizens, feeling completely disconnected from Congress, including in our own party. And you've got you've got a lot of experience with this working in state government, because as you mentioned before, the GOP has a supermajority in Utah. So you're pretty used to this kind of like gridlock and stalemate and no one really being cooperative. So what can you take from that? Like your experience in state government, what can you take into Congress that will help your constituents feel like they're being heard? Because I don't feel like anybody really does.
Yeah, I think one of the things that came out of recent polling here in Utah was that like one of the top two issues was that people don't feel like their elected officials are listening to them.
Yeah.
I've had numerous instances in recent weeks as I've been out campaigning in particular and been more visible. People are like, I hear from you and I don't hear even from like your Democratic colleagues, like people that are in other districts represented by Democrats are like, I've never heard from my legislator, but I hear from you. And I'm going to keep doing that. Like, I think that's our responsibility as elected officials, is to be transparent and accountable to our voters and to meet them where they're at. And, whether that's online on social media or actually out in the community, I think that's super important. I think that helps restore trust. I think people feel like their elected officials, and in many cases they're right, live on a different planet. These are people here in Utah. We have to take 2 months off out of our schedule to go serve in the legislature. A teacher can't do that. A nurse can't do that. Normal people cannot actually get involved and serve in office in many of these cases because of the way the system is set up. And we need to change that because just not seeing people like you at the Capitol makes people feel disenchanted for good reason. I mean, they should feel disenchanted because the politicians aren't listening. They are listening to the big corporate donors and the MAGA, folks and the special interests that are pushing all sorts of crazy stuff behind the scenes, but they're not listening to like the average citizen who shows up to speak at a public hearing, and that's really frustrating. So I think electing people that are in touch with our communities, that are actually out there, that are returning phone calls and texts, and are available, and we hardly have a staff here in the Senate, so it'd be amazing to have like a full office of people working to do the cases that constituents are reaching out about. I talked to someone yesterday, actually, here in Utah, who wants a letter so he can get like a green card through immigration court, and so things like that, being responsive and having staff to actually work through those things, I think also really helps to help people feel like we're working for them and not against them.
Yeah. So how can people support you in Utah, outside of Utah? I got people all over.
Yeah. So my website is Nate for Utah, FOR, nateforutah.com. My social media pages are mostly the same, Nate for Utah. Twitter, I spend too much time on Twitter. That's my big one. But we've had some really good stuff up on Instagram and Blue Sky and all those channels too. So supporting on social media, spreading the word, but also donating is huge. We're running a grassroots campaign. No corporate PAC money, no APAC money, nothing like that. So those small dollar donations really do add up. We need that support, and if you're local, then you can sign up on our webpage to volunteer. We've actually got a Discord channel up and running, which has been
Nice.
really fun to see. see how active that's been. So we're hitting people all over the place, and yeah, we just want people to get involved. Right now, it's a lot of building the plane so we can fly it into the election and put that infrastructure on the ground so we can get out and hit as many doors as possible and start holding more in-person events and that sort of thing. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, thank you so much for your time and good luck.
For having me, Amanda. This was fun.